Hey, so I was watching a video today that got me kind of irritated. I was watching this thing called TTY radio, and I was listening to it while I'm at work because, like everyone else, I'm working in from home, so I can do what I want. But it was called "Former Atheists: What Changed Your Minds?" And it's like different threads from Ask Reddit, and sometimes it's kind of interesting. But unfortunately, like most of the other atheist to Christian conversion stories that I've heard in my life, it honestly, just about every story I heard on it sounded like a load of BS. I mean, I'm sorry, to be kind of mean and judgmental, or that's not what I really want to be. But, I've yet to hear hardly any, or literally any, good conversion stories of people that make the conversion. And, I've even read books on this because that's what I'm actually doing in exchange with some of the Christians in my life who I'm getting to read God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. Um, I'm reading actually in exchange Peter Hitchens' book, The Rage Against God, and I actually just finished it. And also C.S. Lewis' book, Surprised by Joy, which is detailing in both of their cases their conversions from atheism to Christianity and a little bit of other things like about their lives. In C.S. Lewis's case, it's some other details about his life as well as his worldviews. And the same thing with Peter Hitchens. Um, C.S. Lewis's book was too complicated to go into in this video. That would require its own thing in itself because it's, as most things with C.S. Lewis, he's a very smart, intelligent writer, and it's kind of hard to dissect what he writes. But Peter Hitchens was pretty simple, and it was a very common story I've heard coming from a religious background and being now an atheist. Basically, he was a very moderate Anglican growing up. Then during his university years, he became a very moderate atheist because he was hanging around smart people and he didn't want to look dumb in front of his smart university friends, and decided that he'd be a atheist. And then after some years, he decided that he liked the church, just certain aspects of it he didn't like. So he decided he'd take back up some very moderate form of Anglicanism again and say how all atheists are basically communists, which is basically what he then goes into in his book, decrying the evils of the Soviet Union, communism, and why atheists are responsible for all of those atrocities that Stalin, Mao, and Lenin committed. And I'm obviously paraphrasing and being sarcastic, but that is the bottom line, the basic gist of his book. And it's, I wish I could say that they're that much more eloquent, that I've heard more eloquent cases on the part of everyday people, but it usually isn't. In fact, let me read you this one from TTY radio that I read today that just really irked me off. I was a punky little atheist and nihilist when I was 16. I grew up in a Christian household but did not adhere to Christianity at all. I did know that I was a bad person. I lied to my friends, treated women poorly, was super prideful. I felt bad about these things, but not enough to stop doing them. One night after a bad day at school, my mom pulled me aside and said, I know that you have had a bad day, but I want you to know that your father and I love you, and so does God. It hit me like a freight train. God loved literal pieces of shit like me. He knew how terrible I was, and he still loved me. Loved me enough to actually die on my behalf. I ran upstairs, cried myself to sleep, and don't worry, it's almost over. And when I woke up, I knew things were different. It's been different ever since. That was about 20 years ago. I mean, give me a break. I mean, you weren't an atheist. I don't think you were a nihilist either. I don't think that. I mean, I'm a nihilistic person. I guess I feel comfortable calling myself a nihilist in most ways. But I understand enough about nihilism to know how much I don't know, and know that there's many forms of nihilism that I'm still kind of tepid to embrace. If I am a nihilist, I'm definitely an active nihilist. I would not consider myself a passive nihilist. And but one thing I've also learned about reading nihilism is how abstract it is from reading Nietzsche, and that it's not something you can understand overnight. It's probably going to take me some more years before I could ever gain enough of an understanding to really have, an intellectual grip on it. But in addition to that, this is what you always hear from people that say that they were atheists and then converted to being Christian. What they mean is basically, like a lot of my friends from the religious school that I went to and people from my background, well, my freshman, sophomore year of college, I decided that I wanted to look smart for my university friends, so I became an atheist. And, I went and drank and partied, and, then eventually I did some life mistake that I couldn't undo. So then, in order to get my parents to give me bail to get out of jail, I decided it was more convenient to pretend to be a Christian again. And from that point on, I just went back to not caring, but just pretending to be a Christian. And I know that's kind of sarcastic and a little bit unpleasant in a way to say it, but I mean, the truth is, this is what I've seen almost all of the time in most cases, with few exceptions, with most of the people that actually become atheists, usually taking more of a slow road to get there, or the people who do convert very quickly, usually they have to go through some very tough experience that defines their atheism. Like one guy I heard on a coming out video once that came from a cult said that he had to flee the state he was living in. At the time, it was West Virginia, and he had to flee to Florida for his own safety because he was, at the time, not a full atheist, but he started dating a girl that claimed to be an atheist. And the punishment for his from his church was complete social ostracization, and some of them were threatening his life. And he managed to somehow get out of the state, though. And then he got a job down in Florida and managed to escape the whole mess. I mean, and you could bet this guy was a pretty dedicated atheist too. Then, I mean, he talked about how it had changed his life getting away from it, and how and understanding more about secular thinking and reading secular thinkers like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris had changed his life. And you could tell he was a true atheist. But then you hear a lot of these stories like this on this TTY radio, like others who said, like, well, I worked in a nursing home and a guy was supposed to die that night. So I thought, oh, there's no God, and, this world sucks. And then I came back the next day and he had not died, which just completely changed my mind. I decided there's a God, and now I think anyone who doesn't believe in a God must be just a terrible, cynical person. I mean, this is really what you run across. And the same is true, when I listened to some of this one radio host that used to be on called Tom Likas, and he did show segments called Ask the Atheist. And most of the people you run across on that would, claim to be former atheists, it was really, 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 very absurd things like that. Like they didn't even understand what the definition of the word atheist meant. They barely understood what the definition of the word Christian meant. And I strongly, strongly, strongly doubt any of them would even begin to understand what nihilism, absurdism, existentialism, any of the kind of subsequent topics of philosophy, or any of the different variants of atheists like agnosticism or anti-theism mean. Because, I mean, not that you have to be an intellectual to know this, but if you want to claim, to be a major Christian as a part of your life, there's certain things you have to do. You can't just, say, Jesus is the most important person in my life, and the church is my whole life and all this, and then not do anything ever about it, never go to church, never read the Bible, never do anything that relates to it whatsoever. Or even if you're a liberal Christian, which is, I mean, I'm not trying to condemn being a liberal Christian, but then you have to at least take up whatever you believe to be the teachings of your church that you're trying to follow, and take those seriously. And the same is true with being an atheist. If you want to claim that it's this major part of your life, that's you have to actually do something about it. And I know that probably sounds mean and angry, but it's just kind of one of these things that as somebody who's, for the rest all of my life, this issue has been and is going to be a major pain in the butt for me, because I had to sever a lot of connections to become an atheist. I had connections in my life severed early on because I wasn't allowed to hang out around a bunch of people that weren't as religious as the crowd that I hung out around. I had to give up a lot of. It influenced what I studied in college when I was growing up. I couldn't study certain disciplines when I first went to college. Everything in my life has been impacted by this topic, and that's so I don't mean to be mean about it, but I think there needs to be more people that actually take the time to be serious in their conversions one way or the other. So if you had a story, of being an atheist and converting to be a Christian, or, some other religion, and it's actually was a more detailed journey than that, and, you had a much more serious convictions, I'd love to hear it in the comment section. Describe why you became an atheist, describe why you became a Christian and all your reasons. And, if I am wrong, then feel free to prove me wrong. But other than that, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time. Bye.